Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, Lady Esther celebrates one of the truly great occasions in the history of the Screen Guild Players. Two distinguished theatrical families contribute their talents to a famous play by a delightful and witty author. Lady Esther brings you Miss Ethel Barrymore, Mr. Lionel Barrymore, and Mr. Douglas Fairbanks, Jr. in J.M. Barrie's play, The Old Lady Shows Her Medals. And since most good plays have a preface, here is Mr. Barrymore with ours. Mr. Barrymore.
You know, most playwrights have an attitude. They'll tell you no one completely understands their characters. Not even the actors who read the lines, who, so to speak, put the flesh upon a skeleton of words. Well, we have a brilliant author tonight, and a most distinguished cast. I don't mean to provoke a discussion, but after all, we want to do this play for you, so I'm sure that Ethel and Doug won't mind if Mr. Barrie speaks up occasionally and has his little word or two. And that being mutually agreed upon, I think it's time that we let the author set the scene. The place is London during the war. The war to end all wars. You know, the one before the last one. Three nice old ladies and a criminal, who was even nicer, are discussing the war over a bit of refreshment. Mrs. Dowie, the hostess, who also happens to be our criminal, is the first to speak.
Ladies, do you have another dish of tea?
You notice she calls it a dish of tea, which shows that she's Scotch. Oh, but that's not a crime, though.
Thank you, Mrs. Dowie. I believe I will. Very kind, I'm sure. So will I. Do you like them?
Now, these nice old ladies are London charwomen, professionally called charwoman and, or simply Anns, which mean that they're caretakers, too. All but Mrs. Haggerty. She's just a charwoman and nothing else. Mrs. Haggerty, as a matter of fact, is not at our party by invitation. She simply tagged along after the others, and so shuffled into the play against our wish. Oh, I imagine we could remove her, but since she slipped in, we let her stay, provided she keeps quiet.
Thank you, Mr. Author.
Now then, Mrs. Dowie knows, of course, that she is a criminal. But unlike the author, she has no idea she's going to be found out. So all of these four lively old codgers, Mrs. Dowie is the merriest, as she presses more tea upon her guests.
Come, ladies, another dish of tea. Just one more winkle, Mrs. Mickleham.
Thank you, Mrs. Dowie. I'm up to there.
As a matter of fact, there's only one winkle left, and the Haggerty woman has her eye on that.
I dare say I should know, and I say it is.
Mrs. Twimbley is annoyed. Someone must have contradicted her.
That's what I say, it is.
And I say it may be so.
I suppose I ought to know, me that has a son a prisoner in Germany.
Oh, she scored with that one. But watch the others rally now.
My son is fighting in France.
Mine was wounded in 2 places.
Mine's at Saloniki.
Oh, Saloniki.
Excuse me, Mrs. Haggerty, but the correct pronunciation is Saloniki.
I don't think, and I speak as one that has war-saving certificates.
And haven't we all? By the way, I had a letter from my Percy yesterday. My Alfred sent me his photo.
Letters from Saloniki is less common.
Well, Mrs. Dowie, you old rogue, will you let yourself be outdone by them? Show 'em your packet of letters. Go on.
My Kenneth writes to me every week. Look at these, all his.
Well, Alfred has little time for writing, being a bombardier.
Oh, it isn't just how often he writes. Tell me, do your letters begin, Dear Mother?
Generally.
Every time.
Kenneth's begin, Dearest Mother.
Oh. Hey, that was a knockout blow. But go ahead, Mrs. Twimbley. Do your best now.
You're Kenneth, Mrs. Dowie. A short man, I should say, judging by yourself.
6'2" and a half.
Oh. A kilty, did you tell me?
He's in the famous Black Watch.
Oh, indeed. Well, we can't all be kilties.
That's very true.
Mrs. Dowie, this Kenneth of yours, Has he got great airy legs?
Tremendous. As a matter of fact, I might even say...
Excuse me, old lady, I'll have to stop you there. Naturally, you don't know it yet, but your nemesis is about to enter. Nemesis, in this case, is the Reverend Mr. Willings. Mr. Willings has led a rather drab existence, but happily for him, he'll never know it. On the contrary, he always thinks of himself as in the thick of things. Now, as he enters, his smile is triumphant, for he knows that he's in the thick of them again.
No, ladies, please, I really can't stay. Only long enough to tell you, that is.
What?
Friends, I have news.
News from the front, my Alfred, sir.
I tell you all at once that all is well. The news is for Mrs. Dowie.
News for me?
Your son, Mrs. Dowie. He has got 5 days' leave.
My son? Are you sure?
Quite sure. He's arrived.
Arrived? In London?
Yes, indeed. I've spoken to him.
Mrs. Dowie, you lucky woman.
Oh, congratulations.
Ladies, believe me, it's quite a romance. I was in the Church Army quarters in Central Street when suddenly, I can't account for it, but suddenly my eyes alighted on a Highlander seated rather drearily on a bench with his kit at his feet.
A big man, Reverend?
A great brawny fellow.
Oh.
My friend, I said, welcome back to Blighty. I make a point of calling it Blighty. I wonder, I said, if there's anything I can do for you. He shook his head. What regiment, I asked. Black Watch, 5th Battalion, he said. Name, I asked. Dowie, he said.
I declare, I do declare.
I put my hand on his shoulder like this. Kenneth Dowie, I said, I know your mother.
What did he say to that?
He was incredulous. Indeed, he seemed to think I was balmy. So I offered to bring him straight to you.
Bring him to me.
I wonder he needed to be brought.
Oh, he just arrived and was bewildered by the great city. He listened to me in the taciturn Scotch way, and then he gave me a curious laugh.
Laugh?
The Scotch, Mrs. Twymley, express their emotions differently from us.
Oh.
When I'd finished, he said at once, let us go and see the old lady.
You mean he's coming?
More than that, Mrs. Dowie. I mean, he's here.
Well, now, old lady, you're up against it, aren't you? You know you haven't any son, and yet here he is. You're frightened, of course. You wonder how it'll all turn out. Well, so do we, as a matter of fact, so let's get on with it. Let's get the others decently out, and let's face Private Dowie as he comes down the stairs.
Well, how about it, missus? You recognize your loving son?
I'm pleased I wrote so often, mister.
And I imagine you'll tell me those are my answers, that packet of letters you got in your hand.
Well...
Here, let me see them. Well, they're all in order, apparently, all addressed in pencil to Mrs. Dowie, marked open by censor. Hello. Nothing but blank paper inside. Is this your writing on the envelope?
Yes.
Oh, that's it, eh? The Covey told me you were a charwoman, so I suppose you picked the envelopes out of wastepaper baskets or such like and then changed the addresses, eh?
Yes.
Well, I've got a good mind to...
Oh, no. Don't you burn them letters, mister.
Oh, why not? They're not real letters.
They're all I have.
I thought you had a son.
I never had a man, nor a son, nor anything. I just called myself Mrs. to give me a stand-in.
Well, it's past my seeing through. What made you do it?
It was everybody's war, mister, except mine. I wanted it to be my war, too.
Well, you'll need to be plainer. Yet I'm cursed if I care to hear you, you lying old trickster. So I'll be getting on.
Already?
Of course. I just came here to give you an ugly piece of my mind.
Well, you haven't given it to me yet.
Well, you have got a cheek.
Oh, yes, sir. You wouldn't drink some tea.
Eh? I tell you, I just came here to blaze away at you.
Oh, well, you could blaze away while you was drinking tea. And there's Winkles.
Winkles? Where?
Right here in the... Oh, well, there was Winkles. Mrs. Haggerty must have got the last.
Well, it doesn't matter. I wouldn't touch you, Winkles, not me. You're just a common rogue.
Yes, sir.
Now then, out with it. I want the truth.
It's God's truth. My name is Dowie, mister.
No, it's enough to make me change mine. Go on.
I've been charring as far back as I mind. I've been in London these 20 years.
We'll skip your early days. I have an appointment.
And then when I was old, the war broke out.
Well, how could that affect you?
Oh, mister, that's the thing. It didn't affect me. It affected everybody but me. The neighbors looked down on me. Even the posters on the walls of the woman saying, "Go, my boy," leered at me. I sometimes cried by myself in the dark. You wouldn't have a cup of tea?
No.
Then suddenly, like the idea come to me, to pretend I had a son.
You depraved old liar. But what in the name of old Nick made you choose me out of the whole British Army?
Maybe, mister, because I liked you best.
Oh, now, woman.